Hey guys, we have a unique treat for our insurance nerds community. Something, talk about product market fit, finding your audience. Hannah, I think you found the right group of people to talk to about your book. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got Hannah Farber, became friends through Twitter. InsurTech Twitter is kind of an amazing little insular world, a great little coffee, water cooler talk there. Professor of Early Americanist, I think I said that right, at Columbia. Then he got a book coming out late November, Underwriters of the United States. Thanks for coming on, giving us a little glimpse.
I'm happy to do it.
Oh, heck yeah. But yeah, so excited. I already pre-ordered the book. I think I did during the summertime. I'm sure a handful of my friends already did too. I actually know who did. I think Aaron Green, Texas. I think Stuart's got it coming. So you found your crowd. Thanks for working on it for us and give us something fun to dive into.
Yes.
Yeah, it should be a nice follow-up. I know, what was it? Against the Gods talks about London and kind of the London markets and Lloyd's getting started over there. And then, yeah, kind of cracked that book quite a bit. Thanks for writing the next chapter. How long had you been teaching this coursework over at Columbia? When did you start doing this research?
I've been at Columbia 4 years, and the research that turned into this book I started as part of my dissertation at the University of California, Berkeley, which was a wonderful place to go to grad school. And it turned out to be perfect timing because I started grad school in the fall of 2008. And I actually thought I was going to study religion, and then found myself, for reasons I couldn't articulate, being drawn more to economic-ish topics. In retrospect, it was obvious that this was related to what was going on in the world. But at the time, I was pretty surprised. I was actually looking for stories of swashbuckling adventure on the high seas. I was interested in stories of the new nation making its way in the world, commercial actors, privateers, Napoleonic combat, right? Think like Master and Commander type adventures. And what I came across, which originally just struck me as extremely funny, is how many references there were to financial matters, and particularly to insurance, within the papers of the shipmasters, the captains who are plying these incredibly dangerous commercial voyages. And gradually I came to realize that what I was seeing was the underpinning, or the inverse side, or the subterranean network of finance that was sustaining and shaping this world of combat, which we usually understand in terms of captures and naval gains and territory losses and treaties and things like that. But all the while, there are these commercial figures navigating this dangerous, unpredictable world. And here's what a lot of people don't necessarily understand. They have the potential to make huge amounts of money as commercial figures in a world of war. You mostly hear from them when they're complaining about disasters. You don't hear as much about the times when merchants and their insurers, it turns out, are making a great deal of money. Insurance becomes a business of the high rollers during wartime.
Yeah, no, it's super fascinating and interesting. So I want to throw it out there one more time. All right. So end of November, Underwriters of the United States, get your pre-order in now,
Happy
no,
holidays.
it's so funny. So it's really interesting too. You talk about the potential to make some money out there, like the carry, the interest, even the modern VC community was kind of set up. I think after whaling boats, starting up in Berkeley, how all this kind of maritime commerce sort of shaped our capitalism and, distributed risk. The basis of insurance. I don't know. It's interesting. I was a comparative religions major at Cal State Fullerton, so I'm with you. That kind of abstract thinking kind of lent itself over pretty well to insurance. But yeah, I love the industry. It's been super fun and interesting. I even have my nerdy Lloyd's background that I've been throwing on the green screen lately, where it all began. That's really cool. And kudos to you though, too. I'm sure kind of that transition from lecturing on a topic to building a book had to be some legwork in and of itself. I know it always sounds like a Herculean effort, especially a first book, seems like quite the process to put together.
Yeah, for a first book, your challenge is first to figure out a meaningful story. It seems at first like every story has already been told and there's nothing new you could add. But if you head out in any direction where you have a question, you realize how much more we still have to learn about the past and how much more there is to be curious about. And even topics that have been really extensively studied often can take you can often go back to them with inspiration from other fields or other disciplines and see where that gets you. So for me, I was coming into this story, I think, after a big first wave of cultural historians who were trying to understand um, how Americans felt about big economic transformations in their society, about depressions, about rich and poor, about market crashes. Because as economists sometimes forget and then begin to remember, feelings shape the market. People don't always behave rationally, neither do markets. Um, so the first wave of historians that I took inspiration from was using the tools of cultural analysis to understand how people made meaning of the world around them and the ways in which they made meaning affected their behavior. So somebody who's having a certain kind of feeling about the fate of the United States as merchant marine on any particular day is going to make decisions about what they're going to do based on that information they have. The extraordinary thing about insurers is that they sit at the hub of these information networks in a really chaotic world. Marine insurers are not actuarial calculationists in the 18th century, the 19th century, and they really couldn't be. That's not a flaw in their business strategy. You cannot calculate what Napoleon is about to do and where the Spanish privateers are about to head in the next month or two. So insurers are both readers of markets who are at the hub of these information networks. They're getting letters, they're reading newspapers, they're aggregating information, which makes them extremely powerful. The other piece of what they do is that they're also market makers. They shape the world in which merchants navigate through their judgments, through their decisions about what's okay and not okay, through their political lobbying, both in the United States and as part of the American diplomatic community overseas, in Britain and France. Insurers are shaping the world in which they navigate.
I didn't think about that even as like, I'll call it the inverse of best practices. You know, when you're insuring a building, you're like, I need sprinklers, you know, the rails in the apartment building can only be so wide. So nobody, not to be dark or anything, but it's almost this information of like, we've had these losses other places. We bring this back. Hey, if you want to work with us, we need these things in place to take care of you, you know? So that's pretty cool that they're collectors of capital, distributors of information. It's pretty an interesting way to look at it too, you know?
Yeah, so insurance is a form of governance, right? It shapes what people do and what they understand themselves to be allowed to do. Sometimes they feel like breaking the rules, sometimes they don't, but it's always part of the parameter. In modern insurance, and I know very little about modern insurance, and I've kept it that way because I didn't want to be taking contemporary mindsets and projecting them out.
That's a really good
But
point. Yeah.
if you're doing insurance in the contemporary world, laws are always your framework in a certain way, and the way that you structure your business practices has something to do with how you understand the law to operate. At least I assume that's generally the case. The funny thing about the early United States is that those guardrails, those frameworks are barely in place at all. You hardly have a country yet. And all of a sudden, you have a country that's immersed into a world of immense risk, immense commercial opportunity. And the older and more authoritative structures, customs, expectations for merchant behavior are actually coming from the insurance world. So, one way that I sometimes talk about this book is as a book about an old business in a new country, an old business that sets up shop in a new country, but you can see in real time as you go through the years how these powerful information aggregators, political operators are not just slotting themselves into things that into a United States that exists, but are helping shape the kind of United States that's most congenial for them.
No, that's huge. I mean, that to me is fascinating. I mean, I can't wait to hop in there. You're talking to one of the hosts of Insurance Nerds, you know, Attachment Point News Roundtable. So again, go back to product market fit. You found your right audience, you know. But there's a lot of us out there. You know, we're recording this. October 1st. I'll be at a conference in Vegas next week for InsurTech Connect. Everyone's vaccinated, which I appreciate. There'll be 5,000 of us. Insurance Nerds community has 2,400 people on their Slack, 2,000 people on their YouTube channel. It's a huge industry. So it's funny, like, I love the fact that in modern America, you can do this like sliver interest thing that you think is for you or your class, but you find the right network. There's a bunch of people who want to dive deep with you and check out the knowledge that you're sharing. That's really cool. Before we hit record, you'd mentioned writing a book as an academic versus a popular author, like kind of for pop culture. You don't have to worry about being this big mass market. You're like, hey, this is a knowledge I put together. If you want to check it out, here's where you find it. It's pretty cool that you're able to create that as well.
Yeah, it's something I'm really thankful for. One of the amazing things that universities still do is provide space for scholarship that has no immediate financial benefit to anybody. It can just be for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of further knowledge for humanity, understanding more about what it means to be human, or sometimes developing kinds of knowledge that really should go to the world at large. And when that information is not cultivated in a for-profit space, it's easier. Or sometimes you don't know your knowledge is going to be relevant. I did not know that insurance and finance were going to be of broader interest to anybody when I started working on the book. I thought I was off in this piddling little corner by myself, and
Little
suddenly,
did you know.
well, suddenly people are interested in Alexander Hamilton, for
Yeah.
example, who, if you've seen Hamilton at the beginning of Act 2, when he shows up in his dark green coat, which Lin-Manuel Miranda says they picked because it's the color of money, he is, among other things, an extremely influential insurance lawyer.
I didn't realize that. That's crazy. That's funny.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he's on retainer from an insurance company, and that sort of tells you about the clout that insurance companies have. Insurance is extremely formative in the early American court system because it is a business that immediately brings in a great deal of money. And so you're not dealing with the sort of standard bread and butter of criminal penalties, and you're not in a world of arcane legal principles. You have suddenly a lot of merchants who have their own customs and ways of doing things, but they also want to participate sometimes in a domestic court system, and they have money. Insurance companies have money, their merchant opponents have money. And so there's a tremendous amount of money in the insurance business that flows through the early American courts. And in fact, brings up not only people like Alexander Hamilton to financial security, but also later the famous American politician Daniel Webster made his first pile doing insurance law.
No, that's fascinating. It's as you say that, as an insurance agent, I need my $1 million E&O policy, even for my piddly little corner of the world. There's no small problems in insurance for the most part. No, it's fascinating, and I think you found a pretty cool niche to dive into. I'm trying to think. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the book and just seeing how it kind of helps structure, the U.S. government in some ways. It sounds like.
Well, I'm just curious. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
When you're talking to new brokers or underwriters, people coming into the business, which it sounds like you is part of what you guys do, what do you tell them about politics and law and current events in relationship to their business?
So if I'm at a meat and potatoes talk, and actually literally was emailing a friend yesterday who's a chef who wants to get out of it to a more traditional career path. He's got little kids. We're talking about insurance. And maybe I'm not asking as direct on the law side, but more the general what we do, put things back together, help out with claims, solve problems. I always joke that my job as a broker is to translate the world to insurance and insurance to the world, to see what I need to put in buckets and then grab the right buckets to bring over to them. I'm sitting in the middle of those two cross-pollinated things. And then for myself personally, I tried to do a pickup basketball website 10 years ago. 5 years ago, I helped out with a data visualization startup that didn't go anywhere. And then I saw insurance as this unsexy kind of sleeper industry. I saw in office moves at the time. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. The paperwork's similar, but I don't have to deal with a crew and I get paid every year. I'm going to go over here. And I showed up and they feared technology. So I kind of found my niche because I helped use the insurtechs early because the other traditional carriers rightly wouldn't give me the ability to sell their business just yet. But the startups were like, anybody work with us. And as I've become more established, been able to get to traditional carriers through partnerships, whatever else. And I've kind of come to appreciate the tools across the gambit. In terms of law, compliance, everything else, I just say, and this is the simple broker answer, just keeps the wheels of society turning, and I was accidentally a youth pastor back in the day for 3 years, 18 to 21. One of the other things I love about insurance is you can make really good money. And if you do it right, you can actually do a genuine good too. I feel good every time I sell a life insurance policy, or get somebody better rates on their auto insurance, so it's fun.
It really strikes me what you say, that you translate the world to insurance and insurance to the world, because another amazing thing about 18th century insurance is what a self-organized community it is that crosses national boundaries. Early maritime insurance, I wonder if it's more comparable now to, I don't know, to reinsurance or other forms of insurance today that are more manifestly political and function on like a really, really high level. I'm trying to look for analogies here, but one thing that's been true about insurance from the beginning is that marine insurance was designed to facilitate commerce across long distances and across political boundaries. So merchants who are trying to make deals with each other and successfully complete transactions have to have ways of arbitrating their own disagreements, or deciding what sorts of what are the ground rules of their business that don't necessarily depend on states to make them work, because you can't count on, because you have two parties in two different states, and that's not going to determine for you what the underlying rules of your transaction are going to be. So merchants by the 1600s in England, 1700s in France especially, are publishing these giant compilations, these books called merchant law. And if you ask a legal historian about merchant law, they tend to get very fussy and they say, this isn't really law because it doesn't come into a courtroom, it's not a formal practice. And I say, yeah, that's all well and good, but if you have a bunch of people who are following the same custom and they're allowing it to be binding on them because that is the guarantee of their way of business, then that's what they're going to follow. I don't see why they can't call it a kind of law or a legality, a way of doing business. And these compilations of merchant law become bigger and bigger. They become thicker and thicker. I can send you one on Google Books later if you want to look at it. They're hundreds of pages long. And so it very much becomes a business that's organized around a body of knowledge that nobody else can have because nobody else can understand it. There's too much lingo. It's too complicated. I saw on your website your introductory insurance lingo that you were offering to, I guess, people who are thinking about coming and working with you. And that just makes me laugh so much because it's been true for hundreds of years that the complex language that belongs to the business of insurance has been its own valuable commodity, and it's preserved this sort of merchant community for a long time.
Yeah, and I got to shout out Tony and Carly on that. I think you're talking about the insurance glossary on
Yes,
insurancenerds.com.
great.
Yeah, no, it's a good resource. I think the last thing maybe I'll touch on is my own experience being in California. I have friends in London, so it's very interesting. Then we've talked to guys in India. I've been able to stay independent by helping a Canadian startup come to the US. There's another friend I had that had good ties with insurance in Mexico that we're able to offer. And you find, and I'm going to make this overly simplistic, in London, I can bring a couple pages, an idea, and maybe Lloyd's of London will run with it. In India or in Southeast Asia, everything's going to be a lot more mobile first. The US finds itself somewhere in the middle, but the background fundamentals are the same. Maybe Canada with a smaller population, you can go national. They treated it almost more like a big state. Same with Mexico. But the United States has 50 different departments of insurance, 50 different regulators, because I think we are so diverse. I think it is almost more like England than it is like a country, not England, sorry, Europe, than it is a country sometimes. And I think, to your point, insurance and compliance kind of helped the different wheels turn properly in different parts of the country. It is annoying. Like you wish there was one place you can go to knock it all out.
Yeah, but
But
Brett, it also helps
Yeah.
you make money. If you have the knowledge about how to make this business work in one place and another and translate ideas from one place to another, that's a business asset that you guys have. It's an asset that's embedded in the industry itself. So just figuring out how to manage, how to negotiate the regulations in different places.
What's interesting as you say that too is there's different parts of the stack as well. Admitted, non-admitted, setting up MGA versus a carrier. So you'll find all these specialists on this giant grid. But yeah, I feel very lucky to have stumbled into the insurance nerds community to be a part of all this. And actually, I'll have to ask you off air, but yeah, we might have to plug you in the insurance nerd Slack too if you really want to get weeded with some folks. And
I gotta be honest, I don't understand a lot of the words you're
talk
saying.
shop.
I've learned the words from the 18th century, and
Fair enough.
the core ideas are the same, but the terminology, I'll tell you, is a lot different. Plus, you spend a lot of time today thinking about privateers than they did. And I assume that we can also have the conversation off air about legal gray areas, which merchants in the age of revolution were adept at finding. Or I suppose the more charitable way of putting this about today is moments of regulatory shift, moments of just like crossing political boundaries is both a hazard and an opportunity, which is what insurers specialize in. Transitions in legal regimes are political hazards, but also opportunities, which again is what the insurance business is designed to handle.
I wouldn't pretend to know any of these gray areas that you're talking about. So maybe we'll wrap this pre-recording episode publicly. Maybe there'll be an extra moment or two conversation. But so Underwriters of the United States coming out late November. You can definitely find it on Amazon. I'll have links in the show notes and everything as well.
Yeah,
Pardon?
Underwriters of the United States.
Underwriters of the United States. Yeah, looking forward to it. But yeah, Hannah, thanks so much for the time today. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks very much, Brad.
Absolutely.